Hi everyone, Colleen here today. No Christine again. This is episode 75, and Christine has been away. So I am jumping in today with a fantastic guest where we spend most of the time actually talking about how networking, how mentoring, how connecting, and how sponsorship really helped her grow her career. So this is one of those things that so many of my coaching clients will reach out and say, oh, does it really help? Like, do I really need to talk to people? And so Christina today is a great example. But I also have a client this past week who called me because she got a job interview at a great company. She's so excited. It's a company she never heard of. But somebody had told her to reach out to a friend of theirs at this company to talk to them about the potential. And when she called me this week and said she had a job interview, she goes, gosh, like, I didn't think it would ever happen like this, because the person who she talked to at the company said, hey, we have this job that on paper she didn't think she was even closely would qualify for. But after she talked to this person, they were like, you absolutely can do this job. Send me your resume. And lo and behold, she has a job interview. Passed through the first round, is actually now moving on to the second round. So this happens all the time. People will open doors for you, but only if you're out there talking to them. So let's just into the episode today and hear really about all of this great networking and connecting that Christina did to get herself to where she is in her career. Hey, Christine, remember when you were a kid and you thought that your career was going to be this like perfect straight line trajectory?
Oh my, yes. That is not at all what happened. It ended up being way more of a squiggle than I could have ever imagined. And I am so happy that I embraced all of the squiggles along the way.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Embrace the Squiggle, the podcast for anyone whose career or life looks nothing like a straight line. And honestly, it's where all the good stuff happens. We are excited to be here today. It is just me again. We are on episode 75, and today I have Christina Mitten. So let's get into it. Hi, Christina. Nice to see you.
Hi, Colleen. Great to see you. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Excited for this time with you.
Excellent. So we always start with how we know our guests, and you're someone who you had posted something in like the Women in Revenue group on LinkedIn, I think it was, and I forget you said something, and I was like, "That's brilliant." And I reached out to you, was like, "Hey, do you want to be on my podcast?" And you said yes, which made me so excited. So,
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I've been with the Whitman and Revenue community since they started. So back
oh
in
wow,
2019. And it's been, I think, pretty vital just to my career growth, to getting mentorships, and clearly to meeting new people who I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity of meeting any other way.
right? Oh, I love it. Yeah. So we'll definitely jump into that as we're chatting today too, because I think it's right? It's those kind of informal or more formal kind of networking ways that people kind of grow their networks and grow their careers. But let's jump in. So, when you were a little kid, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
Thinking back, the very first job that I wanted when I was a kid was actually to be a veterinarian. I had a little set that I would carry around, and I was convinced that was what I wanted to be. And I would say over the course of just my childhood and even into my earlier education, the medical path in some form was the one that I wanted to take, and was pretty convinced that that's what I would do. When I was applying for undergraduate programs, it was mostly focused on the sciences, with actually a pretty strong interest in pharmacy at the time. So I did go through school and finish with a BS in environmental science and biochemistry, which looks a little different than what I started doing after that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that you even kept that in mind for all of those years is pretty remarkable, right? A lot of folks we talk to, by the time they hit middle school or high school, they're like, oh, absolutely not, right? Like, those are not the things I want to do. We hear a lot from little kids about wanting to be in the medical profession and or be a veterinarian. And I think some of it is right, it's who we see. And it's also right, those are respected jobs, right? They seem to be very professional and you kind of like those folks, right? They look, and also as a kid, like you think of veterinarian that they just get to play with cats and dogs all day, right?
Yeah, so I quickly, in having my own pet growing up, realized just the hardships and maybe some of the challenges in that space. So then I thought, okay, I still want to be in the medical field. I don't want to be a veterinarian and deal with animals. So instead, I'll focus on people. And that was initially kind of the path that I had taken for a while.
Yeah. So you get through college with very science oriented degrees. And what was your first, I always think real job, but I always think, the job where you had to get your own health insurance. Like, what was your first job out in the world?
Yeah, my first role was actually in enterprise sales. I was a business development consultant at Oracle. I joined through a program at the time that they had called the Class Up program, where they would recruit from some of their top universities, and we would go through a pretty robust training program and then start selling. So I focused on human capital management, enterprise resource planning, so the HR and the financial side, fully into SaaS. It was my first exposure into what SaaS even was. It was an acronym that I wasn't familiar with because it wasn't in any of my
Right.
biology or chemistry textbooks. Same with learning the cloud and what that looked like. But that was actually where I had started.
So how did you even get there? Like, was it just one of those like recruiting fairs at college and you're like, well, at least it's a job? Or were you like all of a sudden super excited about that career path? Or like many of us when we graduated college, we're like, ooh, a job, it'll pay me.
It was actually someone through, now if I were to look at it, my network at the time, it was truly just a friend who I had gotten to know through school. I had worked on campus, we worked together. I was, deep into interviewing, and I was mostly talking to pharmaceutical and biotech companies
Hmm.
because I had decided, okay, maybe I'll pursue the research path. I had, made a decision I didn't want to go to medical school, and so I was looking at the Genentechs and Roches of the world and actively pursuing those paths. But there was a part of me, because of what I had grown up with around my parents. My dad is a small business owner and started his own company. I'd always been super interested in the business side and tech. So I thought, well, maybe I'll explore studying and go to business school, but with my background, because I didn't have, any, the typical things at the time you would
Right.
think of, the finance, the accounting, the econs. I didn't even think it was an option for me. So I thought, okay, I'll pivot into maybe the biotech space, get some exposure, and then decide. And around the same time that I was interviewing at all these other companies, a friend of mine had reached out and said, hey, my recruiter is actively looking for people who would be interested in an enterprise sales role. And I remember telling him, what I possibly do in sales at a company like Oracle. Like, I'm
Right.
talking to Genentech about working in a lab right now, right? But it sounded so interesting. And as I started progressing through the interview stages, I realized that a lot of the skills that I had in college and the internships that I had at school and just that like analytical data driven mindset could translate very easily. Like, I literally failed in so many different experiments in school, which translates to customers on the phone telling you no all the time that they are not interested in your solution and they're going to go with somebody else. So that was, kind of a unique path. And it was just honestly the most interesting one. And I thought, well, I have this opportunity to get my foot in the door into tech and at least give it a try. And with my background, I knew if I wanted to go back into a different space, I most likely could.
I love that, right? We talk often about the transferable skills that people have and how you, right, can take one thing and bring it to a completely different industry or career. And you were doing that from day one, right? And I think to me, I'm a liberal arts person. I have one kid who's at a liberal arts school. Like to me, that's also the excitement of these more liberal arts degrees that it's doesn't really matter what your degree is in. You can take it anywhere because you've learned these great skills, these problem solving and analytical skills that literally could take you anywhere.
100%. I mentor a lot of folks who are either in college or just coming out early career stages. And I tell them that a lot, don't feel that what you're studying now has to dictate your path forward. And like you said at the very beginning, some folks do have linear career paths. And I always tell
Right.
people when they ask, Hey, Christina, will you mentor me? I always say yes, but let me tell you my background so you know I have not had the clear, this is the role you take and this is how you so to speak, climb the corporate ladder. My story looks, pretty different than maybe what you're expecting from someone who started in sales.
Right? And I think here's the like, I don't know, magic moment is that everybody thinks their career is this little perfect straight line, but they're all squiggles, right? They all are. I think there's very few industries these days where you're going to start in a career and just like move up and move up and move up and just retire from that, right? It's almost like I can think of like the military as one. And aside from that, it's really hard to find careers that are that linear now.
Right.
But everyone still, for some reason, has in their mind that their career is going to be this. Like they're going to do this forever, right? So you get this job at Oracle, and so how did you like that? Right, this was sales is hard, business development is hard, and so you did that. And how did and then you moved up through many positions there, right? How did that work for you?
I would say that anyone that has an opportunity to do some customer facing or sales type role should. You learn so much about yourself, about the business, and skills that I really do believe translate to any other role. It was challenging, and some days were a lot harder than others. There's an aspect to it where a portion of your own income depends on meeting your quota. And for me in the beginning, it was really exciting. I was working with customers in the financial services space, in construction and engineering, media and entertainment, and even healthcare and life sciences, which with my background was so exciting. And I got to learn a lot in working at a company like Oracle, where it's a well known brand. I was meeting with some really cool potential customers, but it was also really challenging. It was at the time pretty competitive. There weren't a lot of women, especially women right out of their undergrad on the sales floor. And it it was hard. And what it showed me is I really needed a good network and a community. And so that's actually what I started looking for, which, you mentioned that I kind of had different positions at Oracle, and I did. And a lot of it was in part to specifically the women I met. Oracle has an employee resource group called OWL, or Oracle Women's Leadership. And someone had just tapped on me asking, if I wanted to write a blog after one of the events. I just went to the event to attend, to network, and I actually love writing. It's probably one of my biggest passions. I love journaling, recapping on different events, and just kind of the social media aspect of reporting on things is really exciting. And I started doing that. It just turned into this volunteer position with Owl of just blogging and essentially managing their social media presence largely through LinkedIn. And I started talking to other women there saying that I don't know if sales is the path that I want to take right now, but I know the things I like. And what I was really missing actually was, the side of my brain that I used in my undergrad career. So more of the critical thinking in a different way, the data behind it, the numbers. And so I moved into an analytics role, focusing on the products that I was selling, but really being this liaison between sellers and product marketers, which was really exciting. And I learned a ton. Funny enough, through that role, I realized I actually miss talking to people, and that a role just behind kind of spreadsheets and databases I could do well because I have that hard science background and that skill set, but I really missed interacting with people. So that's when I moved into a customer success role, which really blended at the time everything that I was looking for. I got to interface with some interesting customers. I worked with customer success managers. I also looked at the operations and the data behind it. But every time I leaned back into that community, and that's where I found my first mentors, even learning what a mentor was. I had never had that before, didn't even know what that really meant, didn't know how you ask for that and seek that. And even when I was ready to leave Oracle just to find a different culture and maybe a better fit with what I was looking for at that stage of my life, same thing. It was actually someone who I had met through that community who I leaned on in helping me decide between offers and asked me a question of, well, I don't see AWS on your list. Have you considered it? And that's
Yep.
what led me to being where I am now.
Wow. So when you think of, you talked about like not even knowing, right, a mentor, how to find one, how to ask for one. How did you end up doing that, right? Because I think I often coach people to say, if you go up to someone and say, "Hi, will you be my mentor?" People like, right, like there's this like moment of like, okay, am I like attached to you for the rest of your life kind of moment? And so I think there's definitely a skill there in finding a mentor because they can lift you up so much. So how did you find your mentor?
I do think the approach varies, and I've been fortunate to have different mentors throughout my career, some more formal, some informal. And I will say the ones that kind of were a blend between the two have always been not only the most successful ones for me and for my mentor, but have also just lasted throughout time. This specific one was I had attended a meeting very early in my career and just loved the presence that this one woman at the table had. And she was, I think, one of the two women at the table. And I thought, wow, that's how I want to be able to show up and feel confident and comfortable and also show up with grace and kindness if I stay in the tech world. So I just had sent her an email after and I just asked for a 15-minute coffee chat. I think what I tell people a lot is you'll find that most people will say yes to 15 minutes because when you think about it, it's very small. They'll almost always say, well, why don't we just meet for a full half hour? Because what can you truly achieve in 15 minutes? Also, people enjoy talking about themselves and sharing their story and how they got to where
Yes.
they are. So that was really how it started. And she said, sure, do you want to come to my office and we can chat? And then the relationship really developed organically. And we would just have essentially these coffee chat conversations where I came with very specific topics. And then over time, it developed, I would say, maybe into a more formal mentorship. And I think exactly to what you said, sometimes people feel that, oh, it's very binding. Like, I now have this mentor and I'm their mentee and we have to have this. And I think the hardest part is realizing sometimes it's not a good fit. It's
Right.
like, it's like a job or anything else in your life, even a friendship, like dating. This just might not work. And it is okay to figure out a respectful way to thank that person for what they supported you with and then gracefully exit. And I think through time, I've learned that as well because my time is valuable. The other person's time is valuable. If it's not, benefiting or we're having the same conversations, then that's really okay. So I was just very fortunate. This really just amazing woman. Her name's Chris, had supported me and had introduced me to several different people and really helped coach me through questions of what are you looking for in your next role? What energizes you and excites you? What do you know you don't want? And what could that look like? And so she was really pivotal, not just in my time at Oracle, but I had alluded to this earlier, but she actually was someone who had moved over to AWS and I had offers from completely different companies, wasn't even considering AWS or Amazon, and had called her saying, how do I pick what if one of them is the wrong choice? And she had told me, well, none will really be wrong. They're all great companies, they're great opportunities. It's what you want. And then she said, but have you considered another option? And I decided to, very similar to how I'd started early on, even though I was interviewing at other places and had other opportunities to explore something that could have been maybe a little bit different than what I was looking at.
I love how you also talked about, right, different mentors at different stages of your career, right? I think we all need mentors. Often we talk here about too having a personal board of directors, right? Having those people who you can tap into when you need kind of either advice or some help, but they are going to change throughout your career, right? Who you need to talk to at 21 is a lot different than who you need to talk to at 30 when you're in a leadership role. So I love that you've kind of squiggled your mentors and your personal board of directors around you for all of these years. So you end up moving over to AWS, and you've had a bunch of different jobs there too. So how has that been? And what was, that's a very known company. It's also one that I think lots of people is always on their list of places they want to go. And from what I understand, not also the easiest place to get a job. So kudos to you for getting your foot in the door, and then, right, having somebody open that door for you, I'm sure was also helpful.
I think before I formally answer that question, a piece that you said right at the end is so important is at some point in your career, you have to realize you are not going to get to where you want to be with just mentors and you need sponsors. So people
Yes.
who will advocate for you when you're not in the room. And Chris really has become a sponsor throughout my career. And I'm now at a point where I am slowly starting to become the same for other people. And I'm starting to mentor and advocate for people on their behalf, even becoming their sponsor in career spaces, which is really fun and exciting, to be completely honest with you. And yeah, with AWS, I think everyone is very familiar with the Amazon interview process. It is documented well and everywhere, and it's called a loop. They're very intense questions. I remember when I myself went through them, I was questioning, am I answering them correctly? But it was also really exciting because I was just talking with a potential candidate last week. We lean into what's called the leadership principles, and you don't realize until you get here how people really embody them and lean into them. And I do think it is ingrained throughout the business and the way that people operate, and also just in different personalities, which is and which makes it so unique. And Amazon calls it a peculiar culture, which I think is a pretty fair branding. So I had started through the professional services organization in a very mixed role. It was part of a global strategy and operations team on a communications team, but I also got to do special projects because of my unique background from Oracle. So I did everything from executive communications to for the vice president of professional services to supporting an internal Salesforce migration for over 9,000 users. And it was so fun. I think that's what I've loved the most is AWS brands itself as the world's largest startup. And it's funny when you think about it, but sometimes it does feel that way because it's very scrappy and you're forced to be innovative. And it also leads, as you said, to tough challenges and components because you're trying to figure out who do I talk to? What organization do I lean into? What does that look like? So I had stayed in that role and was able to get promoted during my time there. And then just due to some organizational changes, it wasn't the right fit for me culturally. And in reflecting in my career, because I get asked this a lot, like, oh, you've had a lot of different roles. And I think sometimes the perception is if you're, not consistent, maybe you don't know what you want. So I took some time to just personally reflect on what were the common themes or threads throughout all of the roles that I had. And I leaned into two things. All of the roles were revenue generating or
Mhm.
revenue supporting in some way. And they all were either customer facing or impacted the customer in some way. And I realized in the role that I was in professional services, I wasn't doing either of those things as much as I wanted to. So I had a really strong goal to move into that space. And that's when I actually leaned back into some of my network and I just started letting people know, hey, I'm looking. If you see anything that fits me, XYZ things, just keep me top of mind. As I started looking as well, it was during a time where there weren't a lot of opportunities internally or even externally, a lot of hiring freezes. And it was really challenging. And someone who I had previously worked with had reached out and said, hey, this role at AWS looks a lot like what you used to do at Oracle in the go to market space. What do you think? So I had sent an email to my now still a little over 2 years in the role manager, just expressing interest, just asking to have, again, a coffee chat about the open role to see if it would be a good fit. So I moved on to a go to market and business development team. And I've had a lot of amazing opportunities throughout there where I've gotten to move into more of a lead capacity in the space, was recently promoted, hence the different title changes as well. And what I really focus on is sort of a portfolio of communication services called SES or simple email service and end user messaging. The easiest way to think about it is your email, SMS, push, in app, and mobile, the way that people communicate with us. We live on our phones these days, and we all receive communications in whatever way makes sense for us. Sometimes we want them, sometimes we don't. And it's exciting because I get to talk to such a breadth of customers from the Netflixes of the world to really small startups that are focused on AI building, like virtual data IO. And it makes it really fun. And I would say that it's such a good blend of the different roles that I've had throughout my career. And I get to not only meet really cool customers and partners, but I now have this opportunity to share my story with people like yourself and your audience, and also support, both women and men, but really focusing on women advancing their careers in tech as well.
That's fabulous. And right, so interesting to watch all of the different leaps and for folks to hear, which I feel like people can't hear this enough, right? That having those quick conversations, reaching out, talking to people, letting people know what you're interested in is what actually opens doors, right? And often I always say it's not even that you need someone, even from a sponsor or from a mentor standpoint, to even open the door. Sometimes you just need them to say, did you know this door exists? Right? This, who knew these jobs existed? Because I think of half the people we talk to, most of us had no idea those jobs ever existed, right? Like no one's ever,
Truly.
I don't think I would ever be like, oh, like when I grow up, I want to be the senior global go-to market leader at AWS, right? I mean, there's no kid in the world who's saying that. I mean, maybe the kid of somebody whose parent has that job, but right, nobody else knows what those jobs are. And to be able to kind of network your way through and kind of learn all of those pieces is such a key part.
Absolutely. And I always encourage people, if you see something that sounds interesting on someone's LinkedIn, reach out and ask, right? Different companies have different titlings and guidelines and naming conventions, and ultimately just figuring out what is it that they're doing, because there's probably something somewhere else or even in that space that you can lean into. For me, commonly I've always been in the business development and go to market space that's customer facing, which is what excites me. But if you looked at my LinkedIn, you'd think, okay, she's hopped around, it hasn't been very linear, what is it that she truly does?
Right, and there's always that thing that connects everything, right? There's that skill that is so easily transferable that takes you from one to the next and that you get to lean into. And when you find that skill that you love, that lights you up, well, now it's easy to then move around because when you talk to people, you're going to be excited about it. It's not like you're going to these meetings going like, oh, business development is part of this, like how terrible. Right? You get to talk about how that translates over and over again.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah. And so I know we met because I saw you on the Women in Revenue page and you know, talk about being in rooms like that, right? Being or, joining a group like that and making sure that you're connecting with folks outside of your organization and how that's helped you in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just telling someone that I think it's always important to nurture your network, and it's hard. It sounds like it's always so exciting and you have this great network, but sometimes it is really exhausting and you have to pace yourself and figure out what are the right spaces. Right now, there are so many different opportunities, right? There's different LinkedIn groups. Slack is very popular, and there's so many different Slack communities that you can join. And I was just telling someone who I'm mentoring, try them out for a couple weeks. Like pick your top three and see what are a good fit. And if it's not a good fit, you can leave and it is okay. Yes, the membership for that community will drop down by one person, but you also have to protect your time and your own peace and make the right decisions with what works for you. So for me, Women in Revenue came out because a leader who I had worked really closely with at Oracle, he is just so passionate about growing women's careers, helping them thrive, negotiation tactics. And he had reached out to me saying, hey, they're looking for a senior speaker at Women in Revenue. Is it something that you could help with? And so I had reached out to, at the time, I had worked for a woman VP at Oracle, had got her on this panel. And then I just started initially attending their events, and it was during pandemic time, so everything was virtual. And then when it started shifting to some in-person events here locally in the Bay Area and throughout their different chapters, I got to meet some women and just said I would love to be more involved. And for me, it was for two reasons. One, it was just this community where I actually got my very first mentor there who had just coached me through how do you get mentors in your career? How do you find sponsors? How do you advance? And that was just through a more formal, random pairing, but my matching ended up being great. We had so much in common, and the career path she had taken, aligned a lot with what I was interested in, the BD and go to market space. And also, I just think it's really important to always have a network in addition to the ones that you have at the current place that you're at. You had mentioned a board of directors. You should pick and choose from different places. And for me, Women in Revenue was one of those avenues where I could essentially meet other people. And so over the last little over 5 years now, I'm now on one of their committees that's focused on strategic partnerships. And it is awesome. I got to meet great women. I've you know, started mentoring a lot of women in that community in this space, and it's really inspiring to be around like-minded women that are in revenue generating roles because a lot of time they're not easy, right? You know that you have a revenue target, whether it's a goal that your team has to hit, a quota that you or your family are dependent upon, or just knowing that you are quite literally contributing to the revenue of your company at some scale. And it's great to have this community where so many of us from different lines of business can come together and have a platform. It's just a Slack community, and we have a strong presence on LinkedIn and are building on other platforms as well. And I find it a great way to meet other people, right? That's how the two of us were able to get connected as well.
Right. And it's funny because I found it because a friend of mine introduced me to someone who I ended up coaching to help them find a new job. And she was like, you need to be in the Women in Revenue group. Like, these are like such great women. They would learn so much from you. And I was like, oh, okay. So, right. Just kind of followed them on LinkedIn, and I keep finding all of these fantastic women. And the idea of Slack groups, I think, is for many people, have they've never heard of these. When I'm telling folks about networking, like to go find some Slack groups, they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, there are public Slack groups that you can join. And I don't think that's well known to most of the world. And when you get in them, you're like, wow, there's so much here. Right. I'm in three at the moment, and right. But it also could take my full day. Right. I could also choose to do zero work and just read Slack groups all day. So it I think you do also have to be careful that you don't spend as much time. It's like any social media kind of thing, right? It's easy to go down the rabbit hole and spend a lot of time there, but they're so helpful.
Definitely. I think it comes down to asking yourself, what are you trying to get out of this? Whether it's just community, attending virtual events, a different perspective, finding a new career path, sharing your story with others, and exactly like you had said, you're in three, picking what others top, however many you can manage. I don't think there's a
Right.
set number. For me, in addition to the Slack community for my day job, which is my primary one, I'm in two others, women in revenue and women in sales. Those are the two, for women that I've been coaching and mentoring is the avenues that I've recommended them on to date. But there's also a lot of others. It really just depends what you're looking for. And I can almost guarantee that there's a Slack community or a LinkedIn group based on what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I mean some are also, I don't want to say not professional, but I think of like I'm in one for a pottery studio.
Awesome.
And right, I'm not the best potter, but I love watching and seeing what everyone does and everybody supporting each other and being able to kind of connect that way.
Definitely. It's fun to see the different channels that come up too. I'm a
Yeah.
big reader, so I almost always look if there's a book club or a book recommendation chapter in everyone. And interestingly enough, most of the time there is. So it's fun to see what other people recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Christina, this has been great. We could talk forever, but I know we both have to get back to our actual jobs. So we always end with a lightning round. So it's, quick questions, no overthinking. So we will jump in. What are you binging or streaming on TV these days?
Right now, I'm actually watching The Pit. If you haven't heard of it, it's a medical show. So clearly, you can see that my interest in the medicines does not leave. So that's what I'm currently watching, and I'm a big fan of it. I highly recommend it.
It is so good. We stayed up way too late on like 3 nights in a row because I couldn't, I just wanted to watch one more episode. And now I'm sad because the next season doesn't come out till January, which is a really long time away. But at least we know there'll be a season two. So I loved it. It's fantastic. All right. Are you an inbox zero or a total chaos email inbox or somewhere in between?
Oh, I strive to be inbox zero, but given just the number of customers I support and the different competing asks that come in internally and externally, it's a balance. I honestly at this point I'm a inbox prioritization where I set up different rules and route things to different folders and then I try to check those folders throughout the day. But I usually just do a quick scan at the subject line and that will prioritize the response rate. But I would love to be an inbox zero. So if anyone has recommendations on how to get there, please let me know.
Yeah, I strive to be there too, but my inbox is my to-do list and I my to-do list is never zero. So, all right, which do you enjoy more, networking or negotiating?
Tough question. Probably depends on the space that I'm in. Overall, I would say networking. I love hearing other people's stories and continuing to build my community in that space. But a good negotiation every now and then is definitely up my alley.
Nice. All right, and our last one is, do you have a book recommendation for our listeners, either fiction or nonfiction? We always love adding to our book lists.
I have two from a career lens. I love Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. I think there's a lot of great nuggets and pieces of wisdom and insight that you can pull on a more kind of fun read. My girlfriends and I do a monthly book club, and I would say to date, in the almost year we've come together, the best book that I've read is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid.
Both fantastic books. Every once in a while, I'm like, oh, I've never even heard of those, but those I've actually read both of them and 100% concur. Great, great books. Well, thanks so much, Christina, for being our guest today. If our listeners want to find you, where can they connect with you?
LinkedIn would be the best. Just look me up, Christina in AWS. I'm the only one, unique last name, so you'll definitely be able to find me. And Colleen, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm so grateful that you did and that the Women in Revenue community brought us together.
It's so exciting. If today's conversation sparked something for you, an idea, a question, a nudge to try something new, we'd love to hear about it. You can drop us a message. We are on Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok at Embrace the Squiggle. So we love kind of showing up for each other and talking about our careers. So thanks again, Christina.
Thanks, Colleen.
Is it time for you to add a little squiggle to your career? Join us every week to hear from another guest talk about how they embrace the squiggle.
Subscribe now and find your inspiration.